So, welcome along to the weekend preview on Facebook Live, Timeform's weekend preview. Blessing for you that it's just me, in the sense that this is only going to be about 10 minutes or so long. We're going to have a look at a couple of races from Friday and a couple of races on Saturday. Obviously, focusing, in fact, completely focusing on Goodwood. It's the end of this major festival. It's been a great week. And some of the interlinking formats from earlier in the week we're going to touch upon as we hit on a few races for Friday and Saturday. So the feature race on the Friday is the King George Qatar Stakes. It's over 5 furlongs, and Goodwood is probably the fastest 5 furlong shoot in the country. Obviously we've got Epsom and Battaash, but in terms of a downhill track away from testing ground, this is really fast. It's going to be completed in about 56 or so seconds. And when you think about speedy horses around, you think first and foremost of Battaash, who I think is probably got good claim to be the fastest horse in the world. And you think, well, how can you say that about a horse who was beaten at Royal Ascot? Well, I think it was a simple fact of, in trying to prove that he was the fastest horse in the world, he won a battle but lost the war because he just simply went head to head with Lady Aurelia in that King's Stand. He brushed her off and did for almost everything else in the field with a power play in the penultimate furlongs, but because he put so much in to the first 4/5 of that race, he was swimming at the end. He was breathing on fumes, and he was claimed late on by Blue Point. You could say the Blue Point did nothing for the form in the July Cup, but I think almost it just reflects that that really was the perfect storm for Blue Point in the King's Stand. Firstly, because of the unusual way the race developed, and secondly, because Ascot really is his track. So Battaash for me that day was more a case of think of Orfevre, think of Zenyatta, think of Hawkwind. Horses who finished second in Group 1s who were more memorable than the winners. That's how impactful and dynamic Battaash was to me. And he gets the chance to prove that tomorrow in this fastest 5 furlongs shoot, one of the fastest we've got anywhere in the world. He won this race last year and proved that Goodwood suits him, and it proved just how fast he is. 58.5 seconds last year, but that was on soft ground, which if anything blunts a sprinter's natural speed. He hasn't got soft ground, he's got more like good, heading towards good to firm with the drying conditions at Goodwood, and that's going to help him all the more. So Battaash has got one of the highest ratings in the world on Timeform terms. 136 he still is with us, makes him the joint highest rated horse in the entire globe. And if he's going to prove that statistic and back it up, then it will be at Goodwood. Talking of ratings, he's £10 clear of the field, upwards of £10 clear of the field. That gives him, in theory, lengths to play with, lengths in hand on the opposition. And it's unusual when you get a horse who's so far clear in a 5 furlong sprint and is available to back at even money, even odds against, a shade of odds against 11 to 10 in some places as we sit here chatting on Thursday afternoon. So for me, Battaash really should be more like a 2 to 1 on shot rather than even money, because I'm convinced that he's still as fast as he was last year, and if that's the case, then he'll just prove far too hot for the likes of Catchy, Havana Grey, Sioux Nation to handle, because this track rewards speed, and the speediest horse in the land, if not the world, is Battaash. Stall 1, but he was stall 1 last year. I don't think that's a problem. I think that they're just going to let rip on him, and you might see something special from Battaash tomorrow in that King George. The other main race tomorrow is the Golden Mile, it's called. It's a handicap, big field handicap on the mile course. It's a tricky race and a tricky track. You all know that, you've all seen it this week. But especially on the mile course, a wide draw's a killer. And therefore you look and you can narrow it down by just concentrating on horses who are not going to be too far off the pace and who are drawn low in order to decomplicate matters. And just a couple, from a personal point of view is one, and from a company point of view is another. Personal project is this Firmament. If you've seen Firmament this year, you'll have seen that he must have walked under a ladder before his reappearance, because he's just been out of luck on virtually every single start. Last week, in the big handicap at Ascot, the Gigaset International, he was absolutely motoring through in the final furlong until getting blocked, getting caught up in traffic in the last 100 yards, and it meant that we didn't get to see a full force Firmament. We haven't seen a full force Firmament at any stage this year, but we saw Lightning Spear win the Sussex Stakes, and the big word after that was deserved. He deserved it. Well, if ever a horse deserves a change of luck, then it's Firmament. and I think you need to keep him on side. And the other one, more towing the company line, is Fire Brigade. Fire Brigade is a horse who many of you will remember the very first big handicap of the season, the Lincoln at Doncaster. He was amongst the favourites, he went with high hopes, but he didn't fire there, he didn't fire next time, and he had a wind operation prior to Newcastle, which I think, given the evidence, or at least the partial evidence from Newcastle, might just have gotten him back on track, because at Newcastle pretty much everything went wrong. He wasn't in a good position, he was hampered, he had to switch, and by the time he got going, the race was all over. He finished 8th, but he did far better than that, and it just told me that Fire Brigade was on his way back. He has won under William Buick before, he's 1 from 1, and there's just something about an unsung Fire Brigade which really fits with Goodwood, in the sense that he's got a high cruising speed and he's got gears. So both Fire Brigade and Firmament, they are drawn 8 and 6 respectively, so got a good chance with a draw. Hopefully they'll sit sort of in the second wave to midfield, and both of them, with a bit of luck on the side, have got the handicap mark and the talent to impact in this good race, this good handicap. So that's a couple for Friday. On to Saturday. Two main races on Saturday are the Gordon Stakes and the Stewards Cup. Chalk and cheese in terms of makeup, because we've got a full field, a 28 runner Stewards Cup, as we always have, but we've got a 4 runner Gordon Stakes. And if you want to fast forward 30 seconds, that's fine by me, because I'm not going to tell you who's going to be able to win the Gordon Stakes. There's only 4 runners, it's going to turn on tactics, and it's just hard to weigh up each one of the field. The race obviously revolves around DXB, in the sense that we've got a horse who finished 2nd in the Derby, who finished ahead of Roaring Lion, of Saxon Warrior, amongst others. And you think, well, if he reproduces that, then this is as good as over. But the reason why he's 6-4 rather than 4-6 is because he hasn't been in anything like the same form in either the Irish Derby or in the French Group 1 since. It's just looked a fading force, a dried up old snail, in the sense that the legs just aren't in motion to the same extent they were at Epsom. Now obviously we've seen this before with Mark Johnston horses, in the sense of they're hard to pick, they're hard to try and make patterns of or make sense of sometimes, but we know that DXB's got it in him, and he could just run away with this race if he so chooses, and if he gets back to that high class form that he's got in the book. But then you look at what's against him. We've got Cross Counter, who's got all the momentum, in the sense that his form and his career trajectory is very much on the up. If DXB is on the downward spiral, Cross Counter is on the upward spiral. Finished 4th in a really good handicap at Royal Ascot that's been boosted again this week by Corgi. Went back to Ascot and won in really good style, overcoming difficulties, and certainly earning a shot at this Group 2. And then think who won it last year. It was Crystal Ocean for Sir Michael Stout, and how unusual, and therefore how significant for Sir Michael Stout to throw in a filly in here, a filly with a really good pedigree by Frankel, and a half sister to Midday. She comes here on the back of sort of floating rather than sinking when she was in at the deep end for just her 3rd race in the Ribblesdale at Royal Ascot. And I sort of looked at the Ribblesdale and thought, well, it's probably not a strong race given the competitors involved. And then I'm sure, as you've just seen, the Nassau was won by Wild Illusion, who finished 2nd that day at Royal Ascot, which makes you see the Ribblesdale in a slightly different light, and therefore Sun Maiden in a slightly different light. And the field is completed by Bombix, who looks a little bit out of his depth at this stage of his career. But as far as you 3 is concerned, I really don't know what's going to happen, because I don't know what version of DXB we're going to get. I don't know how good Sun Maiden is going to be, and I don't know the limits that Cross Counter has got in terms of going up in class. So it's probably going to tell us something about these horses individually, and the St Ledger collectively, in the sense that there is still a way open for something to stake its claim. But I really don't know, in the sense of tactics or well-being or form, what's going to be the upshot of the Gordon Stakes. And if I don't know about a 4-runner race, how on earth am I going to know about a 28-runner race of the Stewards Cup? But we're going to go through each of the 28 runners in the Stewards Cup, just take 5 or 10 minutes on each, just the pros and cons. Of course we're not going to do that. I haven't got the time and you haven't got the patience. But what I'm going to do is give you a couple of horses out of the Stewards Cup who are at least easy sellers in the sense of making a case for them. I'm going to say 4th a lot in the next minute, so just be prepared for that. Growl, trained by Richard Fahey, owned by the legendary Dr. Marwan Kukash. He finished 4th in the Stewards Cup in 2016. He finished 4th in 2017. Last year he was off a mark of 109, and now he's coming in off 99. So £10 lower than when he was beaten less than a length into 4th last year, and again his whole campaign looks to have been built around Goodwood, and he ran last week at York. Yeah, he finished 4th, but he was only a head away from doing best of the main group who came down the centre. To Be's big 2 of Flying Pursuits and Golden Apollo had the finisher themselves, having ploughed a different furrow on the far side, but it was a real statement and signal that Growl is on the way back, is coming up to boiling point, and given his track record, not just at Goodwood, but this specific race, he's got to be on your shortlist, given the handicap mark he's got. And the other horse, talking of course record, is Battaash. Now this is trained by an unfashionable handler, John Bridger, but look at this horse's course record. He's won 6 times at Goodwood, and he ran 2nd in the Dash at Epsom 2 starts back. That was a lifetime best by Battaash, and it showed you that he was firing on all cylinders, and probably better than ever, despite his advancing years. So he ran earlier in the week at Goodwood over 5 furlongs, but it was his first start since Epsom, so he had a 2-month break. He looked a little bit ring rusty to begin with, because it was 5 furlongs as well that went hard from the outset. And the other thing with Battaash that day is that he was just caught between groups. There was a clutch run up against the rail, there was a bigger group towards the middle, and his jockey and Battaash, between them for the first couple of furlongs, couldn't really decide which way the wind was blowing and ended up getting a little bit marooned. But it felt a bit like a sharpener, a livener, a test run ahead of the Stewards' Cup, and given his course record, I think that he's a player and a live wire at a bigger price in the Stewards' Cup. He's drawn in 1, so he's only got one option in terms of who he's going to be racing with and where he's going to be at on the far side of the track. Growl is on 9, so he's got a little more leeway in terms of seeing which way the wind's blowing. But my 2 against the field in the Stewards' Cup will be Growl for Richard Fahey, given his record in the race, and Battaash for John Bridger, given his record on the track. So because I was so useless when it came to the Gordon Stakes, I just had a quick glance at another race on the Saturday. That's this summer handicap. No 3-year-olds in the summer handicap, so we're dealing in 4-year-olds and upwards, and therefore we should be a bit more established in terms of the form. And this is just sort of very first impressions. But there's a horse in there whose price doesn't quite marry up to either his talent or the way his season has gone, and that's On to Victory. He's about 16 to 1, even 20 to 1 for this summer handicap. But On to Victory has got a really strong case to be made for him. Number one is that he was 2nd at this meeting last year at Goodwood, handled the track really well, 2nd in a big field of 3-year-olds, and that really was just the start of his onward progress through the autumn, which meant that this season Eve Johnson Houghton was thinking about bigger and better races for him naturally. So he came back in a listed race at Nottingham, finished 2nd there, looking like he'd improved again. You can forgive him for not impacting in the Yorkshire Cup when he was up against Stradivarius and Co, and just out of his comfort zone and out of his pay grade. And then the Northumberland Plate last time, he faded in the straight, but that was a slightly unorthodox race in the sense that you all remember what Withhold did in that race, and also the feeling that 2 miles might just have stretched On to Victory. But he's back in trip, he's back at Goodwood, and he's just been back in the weights ever so slightly, dropped 2 pounds since that Northumberland Plate. And it's one of those races where there's no real up-and-comers, because there's no 3-year-olds, and therefore proven form counts for plenty. And in terms of marrying up the proven form and the market, just On to Victory sort of leaped out at me off the page when I saw that he was 16, 20 to 1, and given his credentials going back to last year and the forgiving stance you could take for his more recent runs. So hopefully that's put you a little bit more in the picture for the Friday and Saturday ahead. Good luck with whatever you're betting, and we'll be back with another weekend preview next week.